As far as I'm concerned, as long as that same respect and recognition is not shown toward every one of our people in this country, it doesn't exist for me. And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Once again, I've been able to come across some super interesting people via social media, but this time was on Twitter. And joining me today on the Malcolm Effect, all the way from Jamaica, is Tristan Graham. Salam, bro. Welcome.
Salam.
Thanks for joining me on the Malcolm Effect. I'm going to go straight into it. And the tweet that kind of came up on my timeline, and I thought to myself, I really need to speak to this brother, was, can't be worse than me being conservative until I found Nkrumah and then Marx.
Yeah.
So I definitely can understand. I definitely had conservative sensibilities in the past, but I was never a conservative. And that's something of a badge of honor that I wear for myself. I definitely know, let's be honest, there's many black people who do have conservative sensibilities without even knowing sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think you also made a lovely post as well that people normally entry to radical politics is like, Garvey, Malcolm X, and then they move further left.
Yeah.
It's also very true. And that's definitely been my own journey and my own transition. But talk to me, bro. How do you go from a conservative to Nkrumah and to being so far left now?
So really and truly, it was my introduction to Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
When I found Malcolm and I started reading his politics, I realized that a lot of what I was saying wasn't really making any sense. And then I read Garvey and I was like, well, all right, Black Power, okay.
Yeah.
So then, during that period, you're like more center than you are left, in the sense that Garvey's politics isn't necessarily socialism or capitalism to its fullest extent. It's more like a centrist version. And then one day I was like saying, yo, all right then, all black people need to do is open more businesses. And I was like, all right then, if everybody open a business, who's going to work? And then it was like it just wasn't making any sense to me. And then I was like, all right then. So basically, I started asking the right questions. So I was like, why are the people poor? Is it because they don't have any intuition or any, intelligence or anything like that? And I'm like, no, because I know people who are super intelligent and are still poor. I was like, why is that? And then I started going to works on Marx. And initially, in Jamaica, I think our education system is probably similar to the UK, where we go to like sixth form and upper sixth. So I was doing sociology and economics at the time. And what we learn in economics is the pro-capitalist version of economics. The Keynesian model, the Adam Smith model, and the David Ricardo versions, where the invisible hand balances back out. And I was thinking about those stuff, and I was like, yo, those stuff don't even make any sense. Right?
Exactly.
And then I remember in sociology class, they were talking about Karl Marx. And the teacher asked if you believe that there will ever be a classless society. And I was like, are you crazy? How in the world you must have a classless society? Like, it don't make any sense. And then later on, I'm looking back at that version of myself and saying, yo, you were really propagandized so
Tell me about it.
so well. And like I remember watching documentaries on Mao Zedong and Stalin and just various leaders and how they castigated them as brutal dictators, Gaddafi.
Yeah.
And all of that. I was like, yo, when I started reading what they were saying for themselves and what their motives and methods were for liberation, I'm like, these guys aren't evil. They were just fighting against an evil empire. So whatever method that they implemented had to be, as I don't want to say evil, but counter to the evilness that they were experiencing from the West. So again, I started to shed a lot of the propaganda that I was internalizing, and I fell in love with reading. That is what really changed me. I started reading a whole lot of stuff. I was reading like 2 to 3 books a week. Like even one time, my mom was like, "Yo, where are you getting all this money from to buy all these books?" And like every week, she had to be going to the courier to collect books, because in Jamaica they don't sell the books that I want or I would read.
Mm.
So I'd have to order it from Amazon or thrift books or a bookstore abroad. Right? And
Yeah.
I remember this one time I was shipping in the Communist Manifesto, and I think
Yes.
and I think they flagged the shipment. Like it took me a while to get the book, and once I read that book, I read that book in like an hour, because I read it
Mm.
before, because I remember the day I read it. I read it on a Sunday before I went to go play football, and
Yeah.
the whole time I was playing ball, I couldn't think about anything else apart from what Marx was saying in the book, because what he
Mm.
was saying, I could literally pick certain points out of it and apply it to the reality that we live in the world. Like the whole private
Mhm.
property situation, which most people misinterpret and believe that Marx is going to take away your phone or communists are going to take away
Yeah. Exactly.
and stuff like that, when that's not what they mean. They just mean they want to own and control the machinery within the society. The workers should own and control the
Yeah.
machinery in society. And I started realizing that all that I was told from liberal media, CNN, conservative media, Fox News, and all the other media outlets was total garbage. And at one point,
For real.
I remember when, after I shed the yoke of conservatism, I remember that my family was left leaning. My
Yes.
mother's side of the family are socialists, because in Jamaica we have
Okay.
a People's National Party here, and the foundation of that party, even though it's not that way now, is socialism, right?
Mm.
And I remember my charity work when I was younger, giving back to the poor, like every Christmas, every Easter, like every holiday you can think of. Every year I'm giving away my clothes and stuff like that. And I was like, wait, that is who I really am, not the
Mm.
person who is trying to accumulate a certain status within society, which is what we are taught to do during school. Because I believe that naturally people are left leaning. People don't
Okay.
get conservative. We are taught conservatism, because if you ask anybody when they're born to look on somebody who is poor and try and help them out, they are going to want to help them out. But it's not
Yeah.
until we learn and internalize certain things through our daily goings through society that we become adjacent to poor people or look down
And
upon
then we
them.
have, and then we create false ideologies that then
Yes,
reinforce the why people
exactly,
are in the positions in which they're in, when really
exactly,
and truly it's the system and the arrangement of the economic system, especially
exactly,
in relation to the mode of production that has produced those results.
exactly.
And that's where you hear the logics in it, like, oh, just work hard. So my question to you then is, my question then to you is, you as being a black man, because you hear a lot of things. Oh, but Marx is a Western
Oh
intervention.
yeah,
This from
yeah,
black people. It's a European
yeah.
invention. What can he
Yes,
speak? And again, I think that's very childish and very
yes,
immature
very,
and
very.
naive way of it. Because we heard like what Fanon said, that
Yeah,
Marxist needs to be stretched for the colonial context,
it
as did
is.
Walter Rodney and many others. But my question to you then, specifically, what was it about you as a young black man living in Jamaica? What was it about the works of Marx, for example, that spoke to you?
First of all, to go back to what you were saying a bit earlier within that statement, Marxism is not a ideology, meaning
Mm.
it's not dogmatic. It is an
Hmm.
ideology, but it's not dogmatic in its
Yeah.
thinking. They are dogmatic Marxists, but Marx himself or Marxism itself lends its scientific knowledge to all areas of society, because
Yes.
capitalism is what pervades in all over the world. So Marxism can be applied anywhere in the world, regardless of race, ethnicity, or anything. Wherever capitalism
Hmm.
is, Marxism can be applied there. It is not
Hmm.
universal. Well, sorry, it is universal. It is a scientific study that knows no shade, no color line, nothing like that.
Hmm.
So that is my answer to people who are like, oh, it's a white man's ideology and such and such and such. But for me, Marxism spoke to me in the sense that when I looked within the Jamaican society and I
Yeah.
started to see what Marx was talking about, and then I started looking back on the various historical events that Marxism predicted would happen back in 1884. Because
Yeah.
most of what he said in the book was before what we would put it to happened. So he was basically saying,
Yep.
yo, this is what's going to happen if we continue down this line. And that's exactly what happened. The boom and bust,
Yep.
the boom and bust cycle of the whole capitalist economy, where there's a rise boom, then there's a huge bust that happens like every 3 to 5 years.
Yep.
And he's just showing you, and literally, I find some of his work comedic because if you understand what he's saying, you will realize that he's kind of being sarcastic, or he's using a Socratic method where he's just showing you what's going to happen or the flaws within your own argument. Because,
Mm.
for example, to show you how capitalism is going to destroy itself, the whole basis of the economy is to gain as much as possible without putting in much effort, right?
Yep.
So for example, you lower the wages for workers, right? And
Yep.
whatever they produce, the price is more than what they are earning.
Yep.
So what eventually happens is that you have a surplus of goods that nobody can buy.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do? You throw it away, or yeah, like half of the time you throw it away because half of the food in the world is thrown away because nobody can afford it. So they throw it away.
Yep.
So basically, you are producing stuff that people cannot afford. So what is the purpose of you producing those goods? Just so that you can make a profit off of those goods? I thought goods and
Yep.
services were for the betterment of humanity, not for profit. And then when
Mm-hmm.
you base all of your social relations on profit, tears away the sentimental veil of humanity, where nobody wants to do anything just because anymore. It has to be for
Yep.
something. It has to be beneficial to them. It has to be a monetary value or reward, right? And that denigrates
100%.
the human spirit. Literally,
100%. 100%.
yeah. And for example, I tweeted earlier that capitalism is an existential crisis and a spiritual
Mm-hmm.
crisis, because think about the millions of workers that go to work during the week, and every
Yep.
weekend they have to go to this thing called happy hour, because during most of
Yep.
the week they're sad and miserable, and they have to get drunk and take opioids
Yep.
and pills and all of those stuff that, if in the long term, hurts them. For what? To
Kills them,
make
man. Yep.
Exactly, to make a billionaire richer, to make a millionaire richer.
Can you imagine? And you know it's quite interesting, and I think what you're speaking to right now shows to me the strength of dialectical materialism, in the sense that
Yes.
I don't accept the argument of, let's say, Milton Friedman and particularly Thomas Sowell nowadays and age
Our soul
of
is an
that, because no,
idiot.
that me can't turn him, you know. Me can't turn him.
Our soul is an idiot.
I can't stand him. And I just hate the way black conservatives and right wing folk and even black centrists who have conservative sensibilities use him as their, like, you know what I mean? I just hate them parroting his arguments
Oh my
verbatim all
gosh.
the time. But why I mentioned dialectical materialism, because what annoys me is they literally say that capitalism is just the manifestation or expression of human, quote unquote, human nature.
Yeah, and that's
So
what they
that
always
the,
do.
and also the propensity or proclivity to be greedy, to be
Yes, it's
individualistic, to
human.
think for oneself, to,
It's
to
human.
dehumanize others. All
Yeah,
it is that we have now produced an economic system
that
to
caters to that.
justify, yeah, to kind of just like is a manifestation or of our human nature. And why I
Yeah.
like Marx talking about, like, you know, talk about the base and the superstructure. He says no, it's the opposite is true. We
Mm,
have our relationship with the mode of production, and then we create ideology to justify it.
yes.
And that's the truth. We see it in slavery. It wasn't, and this is something people don't, and this is why I always resist any essentialist take of race. I personally, it has to
Mhm.
be grounded in the material, because it wasn't the fact
Yeah,
that we have to go and get black people because they're solely
exactly.
black. It
It
has
was
to be,
because
no,
of
they
the
serve a particular economic production function. You see what I'm
exactly,
saying?
exactly.
And I think it's
And
very important. I think that intervention for me is very freeing as a black man,
yep,
personally.
it is very. And I remember when I was telling somebody that you can't be against racism and not be against capitalism, because the whole idea of a race
For
was
real.
built upon your ancestors being capital, because they were nothing else apart from
Mm-hmm.
that. They were just capital. And the idea that race is this thing that existed during time, it's completely stupid. Race is a 14th century concept. It never existed before.
For real.
Africans and Europeans were trading long before that for hundreds and hundreds of years, literally. And
Yep.
of course, there was some xenophobia, and Africans were particularly xenophilias, meaning we were accepting of outsiders. Europeans were the xenophobic people. So the
Yeah.
idea that racism is just, oh, and I blame this on liberal apparatus, and I tweeted it yesterday, that the vague definitions of racism have contributed to how we as African people view ourselves within the society. Because I even remember hearing once that I was on an interview the other day, and the
Mm-hmm.
interviewer said that they don't want to be racist against a white person. And I was like, wait, what? What did you just say? You are afraid to be racist against a white person? And I was like, what do you mean? I was so confused because I was like, it was one of the first times I was hearing that, because I never knew you could be racist to a white person in a white supremacy based society where they are literally the standard of who we are as human beings. So and I'm like, oh my gosh, I blame this on the liberals because they have watered down the argument of white supremacy to white privilege, which then
Tell
implies
them Robin D'Angelo, Ibrahim Kendi.
yeah, wait, was Ibrahim Kendi the person who wrote How to Be Anti-Racist? I think he's
No,
the one
no,
that wrote that book.
we don't know him books, man. We don't know him books them, but
Uh,
I know I can't tan him. I just can't tan him, man.
but yeah, like I blame those people because when you water it down to white privilege, it implies that we are all equal within the society, which we are not.
Yeah.
So you don't call it what it is because you want to
Yes,
create.
How to Be Anti-Racist. That's him. Sorry.
Because I remember his name, and he has a whole lot of books. I think the D'Angelo guy is the one who wrote White Fragility.
Yeah,
I
that
believe.
woman. Yeah.
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 Right? So the idea that you are somewhat equal, or we're living in a post-racial society because Obama is now president or was president, and we have all these black leaders. You have the Black Caucus. You have independence and emancipation, and we're all free, and oh, the world is such a colorful place, and yes, capitalism works. It lifts billions of people out of poverty, and all the garbage that you'll hear them say on CNN and Fox News and what you learn in
Yeah.
school. I'm here to tell everyone who is listening to this right now, all of that is complete garbage.
For real.
Complete and utter garbage. All it takes is literally all right, so imagine this. And we're talking about Thomas Sowell earlier. At the
Mm-hmm.
age of 19, I was 19, and I could dismantle all of his arguments. Well, I did dismantle all of his arguments in about 40 minutes. I have an article on Medium where I completely, and imagine this, I'm not even from America.
Mm.
And I was able to do that because some of the stuff I've heard him say is like, I'm like, yo, are you a robot? Like they put a chip in your brain or something like I heard him say once that racism is Nazi propaganda, and I'm like,
Huh?
what? And then I heard him say something else again that they're oh, this is probably the dumbest thing he has ever said, and I don't think he realizes how dumb he was. He said that there were more black fathers in the home in slavery than there were now.
I remember that.
Just think about that. He's literally comparing slavery, meaning when we did not have autonomy over our bodies,
Exactly.
where we were just studs, to what we have now, where we actually have bodily autonomy. And I'm like, does this guy hear what he's saying?
But Tristan, do you see? This is why. Thanks for mentioning that specific example. This is why I don't get me wrong. You know, a lot of the time, people who identify this way on the left, they get accused of being like class reductionist or materialist solely, and not taking into consideration psychoanalysis. And absolutely, psychoanalysis has its time
Oh,
and place.
definitely, yeah.
But what
Come
I
on.
find problematic. Exactly. What I find problematic is that I actively resist any non-material discussions on race because I've just seen where it descends into pathology of black people.
Yes.
Always.
Always.
Oh, you know, and let's be honest, it's not just from the right-wing conservatives who are white. Black people do it as well.
Yeah.
Black people do it as well. Like, you know,
because we have internalized our own anti-blackness from this.
100%. Like the Moynihan report, and
Yeah,
in Moynihan report being okay, yeah, the reason why black people are in the way they are because it's the absentee fathers, or women are becoming too
liberated.
like the men of the heart liberated. I'm thinking, come on, like I thought we left these arguments in the 60s, man. Like, you see what I mean?
Yeah,
But shifting gears a little bit, your bio on Twitter says Nkrumah tourist, who
yeah,
two figures who I love. For those who may not be familiar, Kwame Nkrumah was the first president of Ghana. He led Ghana into independence, and Sekou Touré was the first president of Guinea, who led Guinea in independence as well.
yeah,
People who I recommend. I mean, I think if people want to understand imperialism, or people want to understand capitalist accumulation as it pertains to the continent,
yep,
you cannot escape the works of Nkrumah
yep.
and Sekou Touré. But
Godfather.
why have you put Nkrumah Touré in your bio, basically, I'm asking?
All right. So initially, I was
Yeah, so in shifting gears a little bit, I see you have Nkrumah Touré, Sekou Touré, Touré in your Twitter bio. So talk to me, why is that in your bio,
yeah.
basically?
All right. So basically, along my political journey and my readings of leftist literature,
Yeah,
Gramsci, Trotsky, Lenin,
yeah,
Stalin, Marx, and others, I realized that even though their analysis was
yeah.
excellent, but it fit the material conditions of Europe and the Western
Mm-hmm.
world, not necessarily the material reality
Yeah.
of Africa. So I started searching for Africans who could answer those
Mm-hmm.
questions. Right? Along the way, I saw that the whole idea of you changing your religion and your name and all of those stuff was all good and well, but it was more of a subjective choice than the objective need of Africa,
Mm.
which is the liberation of all African people under scientific
Yeah.
socialism, the elimination of colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism. Africa should sustain herself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I ended up in the works of Nkrumah, Torre, Julius
Yeah.
Naire, Samora Michel, Amilcar Cabral, Steve
Mm-hmm.
Beku or Biko, and Leopold Senghor,
Mm-hmm.
and just all the independence movement leaders of the 60s within
Mm-hmm.
Africa, primarily the socialist leaders. I think I have in my book where I write the primary enemy of all African poor and working class people is global
Yeah.
capitalism in all its manifestations: slavery, colonialism, settler colonialism, neocolonialism. As Torre teaches us, capitalism is an economic system in which the major means of production, i.e., the industries, equipments, tools, machines, mineral resources, and technology, are all controlled and owned by a few people, the capitalist class, who live off the exploitation of the workers for the maximization of capitalist profit. They own but do not work. The workers work but do
Mm.
not own.
Thank you for that. That's facts. Like, I don't have anything to add to that, other than the fact then people often ask. This a lot of black people as well. So how would you respond
Yeah,
to? We hear that a strong continent will make better for the conditions of people in the diaspora. If that's the case, why do you
yeah.
think that's the case, and how so?
Because if you look at any racial group around the world,
Mm-hmm.
there is always a strong base on their continent.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they want to acknowledge whether or not they are from that space, their racial group has a strong base. For example, we all know that Americans or white Americans are really just Europeans who just never want to be called Europeans
Yeah.
anymore, but they're still Europeans, right? Asians who have migrated across to North America, they have a strong base in Asia. China,
Yeah.
for example, Japan, Indonesia is coming up, India is coming up, Vietnam, no, not Vietnam, but I believe it's Indonesia. I think it's I think the technological industry is booming
Mm-hmm.
nowadays. So they all have bases within the continent. Europeans have bases all over the world because they have a continent for themselves, what them call Australia, which they took over from the Aborigines, and the only two continents that don't have a strong base for their racial lines are Africans and the Latin
Mm-hmm.
Americans, or the indigenous people of America, those are the only groups of people who don't have a strong base. And
Mm,
so the strengthening of Africa would nullify the need for the West. Because as I've said, for Africa to rise, the West has to fall.
of
And
course.
I have it in my book as well, where I say that though, or I believe, or I quoted someone in my book. I don't remember who it was, but they said that I think it was Fanon that said that Africa or the West is literally a creation of
Yeah,
Africa. And what he means by that is that the material and the human resources, as well as the mineral resources, are what created the Western
of
Hemisphere.
course.
Because without them, they would not last a day, or even yeah, they wouldn't last a day at all, right? And so, if Africa is to rise and go forth as the champion of the human race, or on Earth, then the West needs to fall, and Africans all over the world will have a sense of racial pride, not to know that, hey, I come from here and I'm proud to be from here, and I can go here whenever
Mm-hmm.
I want, regardless of what is happening in the West. So it's basically an
Yeah,
option, right? So if you are feeling that, you don't want to live in a super hyper individualistic setting like what we have here in the West, or a highly or a deeply racist society, you can go amongst your own people and live comfortably, or even or more than likely live better than how you were living in the West. Then that is what we should strive for.
absolutely.
Because no matter what we want to call ourselves, Jamaican, British, American, even though I would never call myself American, but yeah, like no matter what you want to call yourself, we're all coming from the same place. We're all connected to one source as African people, and we should return to that source, not only spiritually but physically. And the only way to do that is to build a strong continent for us to live on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with that, and I think what's important to also mention, even if you consider the landscape of geopolitics, really and truly,
Yeah,
first and foremost, people need to understand nationalism as understood by national liberation movements is different to the nationalism
it's
that we
different.
see in the
Yeah,
West that took place.
exactly.
That's the first
Yeah,
distinction that must
yeah,
be
like
made.
white
Yeah, it's completely
nationalism.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think ultimately, even if the world we know it as we know it today, let's say with its institutions of United Nations, if Africa had economic, military, political power, it makes for a better advocate for the conditions of black people in the diaspora. For example, when we have the charges of
exactly.
Malcolm X, and before him he wasn't the first person, but he wanted to bring the charge
Mhm.
of genocide against African Americans,
Yeah, to
the
United.
United Nations against
Yeah.
African Americans in America. That was listened to, but it wasn't really pushed. But if you had, let's say now,
Yeah,
a strong
and
African
that's why he
countries
got
that had
killed.
political, military, economic power, they could push for an investigation,
Mm.
like a literally, like a non, what's it called? An investigation, outside body investigation into the conditions of, let's say, police brutality against African Americans. That's just because is. I think what I want to
Exactly.
do sometimes, people, we have these not grand claims, but we have statements of a strong continent will make for a better conditions of diaspora. And I believe that, but then people will ask you,
Yeah.
okay, but how? What does that mean materially? That's why I like to give just a concrete example.
Yeah.
That's just one example for just as one example out of many.
Yeah. And to add to what you're saying, at the same time Malcolm was killed, a guy by the name of Giovanni Pinto
Hmm.
was, I believe, he was in Ghana, and he was killed literally a day
Wow.
after, if not the same day as Malcolm, because Malcolm and he were going to take the United States in front of United Nations, as well as the
Yeah.
Supreme Court, and charge them with the genocide of African
Yeah.
Americans. And that was when Malcolm became, I don't even know what to call it, but he became like a super
Correct.
super
Exactly.
threat, because he was always a threat. Because he was always a threat, but he became super super threatening to the imperial wants of
Exactly.
America. And if you take a look at all of the assassinations that took place across Africa during that time, they went up against literally the strongest empire the world has
Yeah.
ever seen, and they did it without any incentive, meaning monetary
Yep.
incentive. The only incentive that they had was racial pride, the one for freedom and a commitment to
Mm-hmm.
justice, right? And even if you look at what they do or what they did to Malcolm or Martin Luther King's legacy,
Yep.
where they basically water it down to "I have a dream" speech, and oh
For real.
he was a soft guy and he was a Christian and blah blah blah. But Martin Luther King's politics developed towards the end of his career because he
Yeah.
saw that social integration means nothing without economic
Yep.
independence. And once he crossed that line, they had to get rid of him. Literally, they had to get rid of him because you could beg to be. It's one thing to ask to join the
Yep.
club, but it's another thing to want to start your own club. You get me? And anyone who is for economic independence is always a target, especially socialists and
100%. And that's
communists.
been
And for
consistent.
me, exactly. And for me, there are only two economic systems that can
Mm.
exist in the world. And I don't really, and which is why when I hear reactionaries who are so-called Pan-Africanists or Black nationalists say, "Well, socialism is a
Oh,
white
let's
man's
not. Okay, we can
ideology,"
talk about them in a minute.
and yeah, like I'm like, all right then. It's a simple thing. It's either a few will own or we all will own.
Yep.
That's all it is. And those are the only two economic systems that can be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it in the standoff between the USSR and
Mm-hmm.
America, where they were battling for supremacy, and which is
For real.
and again, people should read what was taking place at that time and what shapes how we are today, because there's a whole lot of stuff that was going on: World War I, World War II, the Cold War,
Yep.
the Vietnam War, the independence movements, the civil rights movements, the women's liberation movements. Like, there was a whole lot of stuff that shaped the reality
Mm.
that we're now living in. For example, just look at
Yep.
Cuba and all the propaganda surrounding Cuba
Yep.
nowadays. Just look at Haiti. Look at what Haiti has been going through for the last 400 or 200 odd
Yep.
years since the Haitian Revolution, and analyze that in the context of liberation, in the context in our context of imperialism, in the
Thank
context
you.
of neocolonialism and dialectics, because literally dialectics covers all of that. And again, dialectics was not found by
Of course.
Marx; it was developed by Marx. Dialectics have been around since the Egyptians. A lot of what we call foreign to us are really our concepts that left Africa and were developed elsewhere. And even if it was developed elsewhere, it is scientific, which makes it
Mm-hmm.
universal, which means it can be applied to any human being across the
You're
planet,
spitting like
regardless of
Stokely
their
right
racial
now.
background.
You're spitting like Stokely right now. That's how he talks. I love it.
And he and he's one of
Yeah,
my
no,
heroes.
for
He
real.
literally
For real.
Kwame Ture was probably the person who opened my eyes
Mm.
most to the whole socialism thing. Because even though I was reading Marx, I was still
Yep.
skeptical because the propaganda is very, very strong. So
Yep.
you are afraid to call yourself a socialist or a communist because you're like, yo, people are going to hate you, and oh, they killed so many people. So is it still a good idea? Which is all garbage, by the way. The whole killing thing is propaganda. But when I heard Kwame Ture speak, and I likened my story
Mm.
to his, where he started off, kind of in the
Yeah.
center,
Yeah.
slick and liberal, and until he realized that reform and like the whole reformism and the Fabianist tactics of getting to socialism was all garbage, and he went to the revolutionary side, formed the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which I'm now a part of, and he's one
Oh,
of the
dope.
influences
Amazing.
of that. And when Stokely speaks, literally you can't help but listen.
Mm-hmm.
And he breaks it down in such a way where it's so simplistic that even a madman who doesn't really have any intellectual capabilities can understand what he's
Trust
trying
me.
to
Now he
bring
breaks
to
it
you.
down, you know.
And the only way you can reject it is if you're just willfully
Not for real.
ignorant. Like that, like that's the only
What's he
way.
like? He's like, you've got labor and then you've got capital and they're always in conflict.
Yes, yes, It's so simple. It's so simple. It's so
Nah,
simple.
for real.
And I remember one of his speeches where he was saying wherever capital dominates labor, there will be a constant and antagonistic relationship between capital and labor until labor comes to overcome capital. I'm like, yes, Goku, you're
You're
perfectly
spitting.
right.
You're spitting, and we see it, and we observe it. We have observed it, and we observe it. Do you see what I mean? So it's fact at
Yeah,
this point. Shifting gears a little bit, I have so many questions for you, but I've got probably two, three more, and you can tackle them in any way in any way which you want to, and in any order. So you said,
yeah,
oh, people, you get embarrassed to call yourself like labels of communist or Marxist because people say about these ideologies are responsible for killing X amount of people. Second thing I want you to respond to
yeah.
is how do you deal with people who are culturally Pan African but basically capitalist? And thirdly, maybe we could end with that.
Yeah.
I like to have my lens on the international. Please talk to me about the scene in Jamaica right now and the movements in terms of like socialist and building
Okay.
socialism. So those are the three final things.
Okay. So I'm gonna tackle the Pan African
Okay.
one first. Alright. So in my book I define Pan Africanism because I try to be, fair to give validity to whatever side of Pan Africanism you find
Mm-hmm.
yourself on. So I have amongst various groups the term Pan Africanism has taken on
Yeah.
various meanings. It has been characterized as one is the belief that people of African descent have common interest and should be unified, and two, the total liberation and political unification of the entire continent under scientific socialism. In the neo pragmatic view, this first term isn't applicable to my subjective view as to what Pan Africanism
Mm-hmm.
is. The revolutionary political tendencies from which Pan Africanism developed could accurately be described as defiant. Pan Africanism is certainly a strategy and an ideology that is uncompromising in its resistance to colonialism, imperialism, and I'm going to say this,
Mm.
capitalism. However, stopping at such a nubilous and emotional driven descriptor or stopping at such a nubilous and neglecting to mention the clear history when describing Pan Africanism only serves the purpose of obscuring world changing and yet unmet political objectives. It is a revolutionary response to disposition, exploitation, and the genocide of African people everywhere. It is Africa's contribution to the battle for universal emancipation and the global, again, I'm going to emphasize, communist movement. The idea of communism is a sour and often misunderstood ideology. The essence of communism is to create a classless society. That's it. However, due to the CIA and anti-communist propaganda machines, people most likely attach negative connotations to communism whenever it is mentioned. So, to my cultural nationalists
Mm-hmm.
out there, right? If you are listening to this, I would like to ask you, or I will say to you that I have realized that your emotional connection to Africa is far above many Africans who live in the diaspora. But at the same time, you have to see that there are material needs that need to be met. Because I
Mm.
can change my name, I can change my religion, I can denounce Jesus Christ, Muhammad, Abraham. I can practice the Yoruba religions, the Orishas. I can worship my ancestors. And I'll wake up tomorrow morning still broke, still poor, and still depressed
Mm-hmm.
because my material needs aren't being met because the economic system that I'm living in currently doesn't
Mm.
allow it. And yes, you might want to say, well, you can go back to the African traditional ways, but you will also leave out a huge, huge, huge thing within your
Yep.
analysis, which is the world is globalized now. It is not cut off, it is a global system.
Yep.
So you need a global solution. And also, your analysis lacks class interests,
Mm-hmm.
which is what they use to enslave us and create the colonial regimes. They use the chieftains who were a class above the average people
Yep.
or the rulers of the kingdom in order to enslave the
Yep.
people. So, what are you going to do? You want to go back to feudal times? or you want to move forward, because that's what most of I hear, or what I hear from them is that they want to go back in time, right, to this and that. Yeah, we want to. Afrocentricity is at the core of Pan Africanism, but at the same time, you have to realize that Africa wasn't a utopia, and that we ourselves had internal
Of course.
contradictions that we need to resolve, right? And I'm not saying we need any outside intervention. I'm talking about us as African people need to resolve, right? And if you read the history, you will see that one of the reasons why Africa was so easily overrun was because, for one, Songhai
Yeah.
fell, and that made it kind of easy for the Europeans to come in. But first it was the
Yeah.
Moroccans who came across, and then Europeans, and then when you go to East Africa, or Central Africa, you have the Oyo Empire, which was split, and you had the Dahomey on the fringe, and you had the Fulani, and then Oyo took over all of that land. And then when they started the slave trade with the British, like, you could see the tribes fractioning, and this one fighting against this one, and this one selling this the other one into slavery, and such and such and such. Again, I'm not approaching it from the angle that a conservative would use, that would try to say, oh, Africans sold Africans into slavery, and we are the reasons why we're here. No, that is complete garbage. But what I'm saying is, we as Africans have to acknowledge that there is a class system that is
Yeah.
within Africa, and it's not unique to just Africa alone. It's unique. It is a universal concept. Hierarchy exists, or has existed, in all societies. So, and if you want to engage in any sort of class analysis, you have to engage in people who don't look
Hmm.
like you. Because for me, not engaging in thought because of how someone looks is
Yeah.
anti-intellectualism, or that's what I call it. Because no one group of human beings are responsible for everything that
Of
has
course.
happened on Earth, right? And I believe that we have kind of
Yep.
internalized that, given our colonial relationship with Africa, with Europeans, where we want to prove that we are the only ones who respond, which is a response to them saying we don't know anything. But we know now that, hey, we were the ones who gave you all of that knowledge that you developed, and you're just now carrying it back. So if you know all of that, then why are you so hesitant, or so hesitant to
Hmm.
engage in it? Because it's really yours. Because you gave it to them, and and now they're reproducing it, or
Yep.
building on it, to help fit your materiality. And as I said earlier, it is a
Yep.
scientific thing. It's not a white man science. There's no such thing as
Yep.
white man science. And to use the example of Kwame Ture, where he says Newton laws aren't really his laws. He didn't invent
Exactly.
them. He just observed
Exactly.
it and wrote them down. And if you read the history, you realize that what Newton saw was discovered in Egypt 1,000 years before. And the Islamic scholars had ideologies similar to
Exactly.
what he was saying thousands of years before. So it's not like development is linear, it's non-linear. It happens similarly all
For real.
across the world. So if you can use it to solve your material reality, which is what we need to do, because not everybody is going to want to be a voodoo priest, or a Yoruba priest, or a Muslim, or a Christian, or a Jew, or whatever you call it, because those things are subjective to the person's
Yes.
belief. What we need to address is the material
People.
needs of everybody, because the only thing tangible to everybody, and universal to everybody, is the material earth that we are
Hmm.
connected to. God and gods and no God is not a universal thing to all
Exactly.
people. Everyone has their own opinions as to which God or which gods they need to serve. We can have an intellectual debate about whether it's
Yep.
true or not. Yes, but when you're talking about a liberation movement, it should be for everybody, regardless of sex,
Yep.
gender, religion, and whatever other category there is. Right? And no matter how strong your personal opinions are, and how strong your personal preference is, the fact of the matter is you're doing it for all the people. That's why it's called
Yep.
pan. It it wasn't called semi. It
Hmm.
wasn't called uni. It's called pan. Pan means
For
all
real.
African people, all of them. And the only system that can do that is socialism. I have never heard anyone get liberated by
Yep.
capitalism. That is literally
And it's a shame.
impossible because the basis of
And it's a shame in the sense that,
exactly
sorry,
the
carry on.
basis of
No, it's
no,
a
go on,
shame
go on.
because you find that, not saying the people who are the most well read, but the people who who dominate the discourse literally have the logics of, let's just buy black business. Let's just buy back the block. Oh my God, we need to have black
Gentrification.
billionaire class, and all these logics that let's just somehow we can become capitalist, and that will secure liberation for black people. And really and truly, I think I tweeted just yesterday, I said the true generation, people talk about the language of trauma, and which is very important. I'm glad people are seeking professional help and trying to break generational curses. But I said, I tweeted yesterday or a couple of days ago, the true generational curse is trying to break free from, or organizing around the theory
From
that will
capitalism.
reproduce the same systems of domination. That's the what we're trying to break free from,
Yeah,
really. And I get it, it's very difficult. We've all been socialized into a specific way of thinking.
exactly that. And and I always find it funny when cultural nationalists, or I call them cultural reactionaries, that they internalize a lot of what white pathology has
100%.
brought to the fore, and they don't deal with reality. Because, for example, we like the idea that there were no prisons
Yeah.
in Africa, right? But if a gay person is locked up in prison, the cultural nationalists, because they're homophobic, will rail and say, yes,
For
lock
real.
them up. And yeah, and I'm like, bro, you realize you're contradicting
Yep.
yourself, because you, for one, like the African way and the traditions of Africa pre-colonially, but yet still you're cheering for what would have been castigated as non-African in the earlier days. No, just because it goes against your personal belief, but yet still you will come and chastise someone who proclaims themselves a socialist, right? Because they realize that that is the economic framework for
I know that.
the world.
Yep.
And I also have a question. Like, I have yet to hear them counter with an actual framework for society. They have never countered with an actual solution. All they've done is criticize. So they'll criticize socialism, and you will ask them, okay, what is your alternative? And I had a debate with a guy like earlier this year, and I can't forget it. And I was in my early years of transitioning to
Yeah.
socialism, and he was, and I said, okay, what is the economic structure that you believe Africa should be under? And you wouldn't believe what he said to me.
What did he say?
He said, the one that Chancellor Williams described in his book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. And I'm like, what? You are telling me that you want the entire system of Africa to be governed by what you read in a history book? Literally, it's not an economic book, it's a history book from a
For real.
historian, and that's one book. And then I challenge him. I say, okay, what do you know about Chancellor Williams? Because there are a lot of things that he got wrong in that book. First of all, which many people don't know, he was sponsored by the U.S.
Oh
State
wow.
Department. So that's one. So again, you are regurgitating white talking points without even knowing, because you don't do the research into what he's saying. Again, to most people, Chancellor Williams was a Christian, a devout Christian. All the trash that he's talking about Muslims in the book, it was intentional, because the only kingdom that could rival the Christian kingdom was the
Yes.
Muslim kingdom, and the sources that he read were decrypted by Christians. They weren't first-hand sources from the Arabic texts of West Africa. They were decolonial or colonial interpretations of African history, which he developed on. So the foundation of his work is not, you know, valid or substantial to all that. And you're going to look at me and tell me that Africa should develop their
System
economic
based on
and social relations based on research in that book? Are you crazy? And I'm like, okay. And then I said to him again, what? So I asked him, what is the name of the system? He told me to go and read the book. So I said, I have read the book. Can you tell me what it says? Because obviously he doesn't know what is in the book, because he probably just tell me that because he thought I didn't
Yeah.
have any sense. But so I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you what is in the book. What
Chancellor Williams describes is a sort of a collective democracy, which is kind of like a social democracy, where it's still subservient to capitalism. So it's still based on exploitation.
Mm.
And I'm like, bro, you can literally look in Africa right now and see what capitalism has
Exactly.
done. Just look at the Congo. The Congo is the perfect
For real.
example. The Congo is literally the richest land on earth. Literally. I tweeted it the other day and it went viral. I got like
Oh wow.
60,000 retweets and stuff. And I was like, yo, so many people don't
Mm.
know this. Literally, Congo soil is worth, I think, I don't remember the exact amount. I think it's 20 something trillion dollars. $24 trillion alone. Like the soil alone is worth $24 trillion. Right? And they generate 300 billion every year in profit. Right? But only 3 billion remains in the country. So imagine that. And you know where all the money is going?
Of
To
course.
private firms outside of
Of
Congo.
course.
And again, one of the major investors in Congo, I can't remember his name now, but he's a Zionist from Israel. So you see where it's not just well, although the West is Israel still, because Israel is a
100%.
Western
Yep.
creation. So you see where the exploitation of Africa is not subject to only those in the Western hemisphere. And in Nkrumah's book, or a book I was reading in relation to Nkrumah, where it says we don't want to replace white exploitation with black
Yep.
exploitation, because that is exactly what we'd be doing. Like the other day, I see people railing over Rihanna becoming a billionaire. I was like,
Exactly.
okay, what does that do for everybody else? And it's a false class consciousness, and because people aren't aware of class consciousness, they fall prey to stuff like that all the time. So because over the years we have been deprived of visibility within the empire, now that we've got the visibility, we feel that, or we feel that that is it. Obama, regardless of how black he is, he's one of the worst things I
Happened
believe that
to black
has ever
people.
happened to black
Honestly,
people
I
ever,
genuinely believe that.
because he basically turned off the
Yep.
lights in our brains because of his visibility. And during his time, he did more to hurt Africa than any other
Literally.
president. Bombings in Somalia. He destroyed literally and I like, I want to make a joke out of it, but it's not even funny. But he literally blasted Libya back into the
Yep.
15th century. He literally is responsible for the slave trade that is now currently going on in Libya. And I'm like, you people are looking at this man as your hope. And whenever I see him in pictures, like posters
Oh,
with
I feel
Malcolm X
sick.
and
I feel
MLK,
sick.
I'm like, yo, are you guys crazy, bro? And like when they put Michelle Obama next to people like Angela Davis and and Shirley Chisholm and Mrs. Garvey, and I'm like, Michelle, bro, are you guys stupid? And like, it's so annoying. And I'm going to implore people or anybody who's listening to this now, visibility within the empire is nothing, because as long as the empire exists, they are going to serve the interests of the ruling class, because that's how they maintain their power as the petit bourgeois class of Africans or black people. And you can see it. And I always tell people, I liken the American empire to Rome. It is literally the child of Rome, but just richer and smarter in its doings. For example, Rome, even though it was brutal and imperial, it still incorporated anyone from the territory that it took over into the empire to become a part of the army or anything like that. For example, one of the major or the most known uprising within the Roman Empire was one that happened in Judea with the Jews, or what we would call the Zealots, were rising up against Rome, and they defeated the Romans
Yeah.
during that time. And during that time, Rome was weak, because I believe it was the year of four emperors, or I'm probably wrong about that. But no, it was the year of Emperor Nero, Madman Nero. Yes, and Nero sent in Vespasian and his son to shut down the Romans, right? And sh- sorry, the Jews. And the Jews, basically, you had the Pharisees who were supposed to be the proxy rulers for Rome, which would be similar to the chieftains in Africa, which would be similar to the politicians that we have now. So again, you are seeing a trend within the whole idea of imperialism or colonialism. It's constant
Hundred
throughout
percent.
history. Again, historical
100%.
materialism. You have to read Marx. You have to read. So, like, back to what I was saying, they incorporated Jewish writers and demagogues, as I'd call them, because they are leaders,
Yep.
they're demagogues, into the empire to carry out their
Hundred
imperial
percent.
interests. And if you went against it, they would kill you, or they would kill all their people, or something. And it's exactly what happens today.
And this has
Exactly what
been. I
happens
mean, the
today.
thing is, I'm just mindful of time. But I know, bro. I already know I have to get you on again now. I already know because I know we're gonna have so much more to talk about. Because you're speaking, and
Yeah,
so much is
definitely.
coming to mind. I'm thinking right now. People talk about China on the continent. Is it imperialistic? We have the cultural nationalists. So, and that's
Oh my
I'm thinking of that and
gosh.
how it's not. And but there's so much. But I'm just mindful of time. But if you can, maybe as succinctly as
Mhm.
possible, break down to me the landscape of Jamaica right now
Yeah.
in terms of the activism scene. I think it's for my own knowledge as well.
Oh my gosh. Jamaica, Jamaica,
Jamaica,
Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Right now, Jamaica is incredibly
Hmm.
passive, especially in my
Okay.
generation. And I see it all the time whenever there is a social problem. We just go on Twitter and rant, and
Yeah.
then that's it. There is like, I'm a part of a group in Jamaica called
Okay.
LANS, the Left Alliance for National Democracy and
Okay.
Socialism, I believe. Right, and that's really the only left wing organization in Jamaica that
Mm.
I know of that is actually organized. Right, in Jamaica, you mostly have, we are a right wing country
Okay.
currently, and most people don't know that. We are controlled by the Jamaica Labour Party, which is pro capitalist and pro US
Okay.
and all of that, primarily because of the failings of the People's National Party. Basically, they got corrupted and they weren't really doing
Okay.
anything. And also, the JLP were more or are more organized than they are, because right now we don't have an
Oh
opposition.
wow.
Literally, we don't have an opposition. Party members are dropping like flies. People are resigning out of nowhere. Like, it's really like we're literally a one party
Mm.
state right now, which is right wing.
Wow. Okay.
How sad that is. Our corona situation is incredibly horrible. The hospitals are beyond capacity, like 110%
Oh
over
rotted.
capacity and stuff like that. We get like, for a small island, we get like 300 to 400 cases every day. Curfew measures are imposed like for like 2 years now.
Rotted.
We can't be out on the road later than, I think the latest curfew we've ever gotten was 10 o'clock. Yeah, 10 o'clock. Now it's 7 o'clock. So all businesses have to be closed by 4. Everyone has to be home by 7, and then give you like a grace period to like 8. Local industries are suffering, primarily the events industry, given the
Hmm.
corona. And because our economy is basically built around
Yes.
tourism. So the tourist sector is in a extreme drought right now because no one can
Yeah.
come to the island, or no one wants to come to the island, and no one's traveling. So money or foreign exchange isn't coming in. They are destroying the environment to make way for capitalists to build up property or more hotels. They recently announced that they want to gentrify St. Thomas, even though they didn't use the word gentrify, but that's what they're going to do, because they say they want to make it the next tourist destination, and that is code word for, hey, we're going to move all the local people out and build a place for tourists to come. So basically, gentrification. Recently, the police cut off a Rasta
Oh my
girl's
god.
hair. Literally, they cut it off. They arrested her and they cut it off. So the Rasta community now is in upheaval. On Independence Day, there was a LGBTQ
Hmm.
protest, which was kind of unnecessary,
A protest what against the government
because
or
there's,
what do you mean?
no, as in against the LGBTQ flag at
Oh,
the
okay.
U.S. embassy, and I was like, there are so many other things going on that could use our
Okay.
attention. A flag is not going to do anything
Exactly.
to us. Yeah, that is the political climate at the time. The people are suffering inflation. Oh my gosh, inflation is crazy, bro. Like, I don't know how to put it in a context that the listeners can listen. Oh wait, sorry, can understand. But let's see here. Okay. Basically, bread used to be like $250. Now it's
So, wow,
$500.
double.
Right? Basically, pay isn't increasing, but everything else is. Right? Most Jamaican people don't work high paying jobs. So you could have a master's degree in
Yeah.
Jamaica and not and you won't even be taking home £3,000 a month. Right? The healthcare situation is shit. Our infrastructure is shit. Schools, oh my gosh, schooling, oh gosh. Even though our education system, meaning in terms
Yeah.
of material, is better than most of the world, especially America. Currently, children aren't going to school because, it's online. Not everyone has a laptop or the internet. And I think most people think of Jamaica as
Yeah.
just Kingston. So they forget about the rural
Yeah.
areas, which are densely populated. Yeah. So if you aren't from a specific class in Jamaica, your life is pretty is literally shit right now. And that is most of the population.
And I mean, such a bleak note to end out with, but what we will do next time, because I do want to interrogate, maybe we can interrogate further about the kind of class relations in Jamaica, which I think will be fascinating for people to listen to. And also we can talk about, you said about the propaganda people consume about, but this ideology of communism is responsible for so many deaths. I'd love to unpack that with you further. But
Yeah.
thank bro, this has been an absolute masterclass. So I'm going to post Tristan's socials in the description of this episode. He has a book. Please check it out. I'll post a link to that as well. And until next time you're listening to the Malcolm Effect with Mohammed, as always, please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, peace out, people.